Here's something that might surprise you. After using psychedelics, some people never see the world quite the same way again. And I mean that literally. Their visual perception remains permanently altered.
That's fascinating and honestly pretty concerning. Are we talking about actual changes in how the brain processes visual information?
Well, that's exactly what researchers are trying to figure out. It's called hallucinogen persisting perception disorder, or hppd, and it's way more complex than just seeing things differently.
Let me guess. There's a psychological component too?
You know what's really interesting? The visual distortions are often less problematic than the anxiety and distress they cause. We're talking about people seeing geometric patterns, visual snow, like TV static overlaid on everything, and trails behind moving objects.
That sounds incredibly disruptive to daily life. How do people manage?
Well, that's where it gets complicated. Some people develop what they call type 1 hppd, where these effects come and go in episodes. Others have type 2, where it's constant but can get better or worse depending on triggers like stress, fatigue, or even caffeine.
So what exactly happens in the brain to cause this?
The leading theory involves something called disinhibition of the visual cortex. Basically, the brakes come off the visual processing system. But here's what's fascinating. It can happen after just one use, or sometimes months later, and we still don't fully understand why some people are affected while others aren't.
That's really concerning given the current push for psychedelic therapy and mental health treatment.
Exactly right, and that's why organizations like the Perception Restoration Foundation are working so hard to understand it better. They're conducting brain imaging studies, genetic research, even making a documentary called Living in a Distorted World.
How widespread is this condition? Are we talking about a lot of people?
Well, that's another tricky aspect. While some kind of visual change after psychedelic use might be relatively common, diagnosable hppd, where it seriously impacts quality of life, seems rarer. But here's what's interesting. Online, hppd communities have tens of thousands of members.
That suggests it might be more common than officially recognized.
And what's particularly challenging is that many people feel they can't talk about it because of the stigma around illegal drug use. Imagine dealing with this profound change in how you perceive reality while feeling like you can't even seek help.
How do doctors even approach treating something like this?
There's actually a range of approaches. Some medications like lamotrigine show promise, but the psychological support seems crucial. It's about managing anxiety, learning coping strategies, and sometimes even finding ways to make meaning from the experience.
That's really interesting. Finding meaning in what could be seen as just a disorder.
Right, and some people actually channel it into art or find spiritual significance in their altered perception. But let me tell you about this fascinating case where a psychiatrist who had similar drug-free visual experiences was able to really connect with an hppd patient.
Just that understanding made a difference?
Huge difference. It highlights how isolation and feeling misunderstood can make symptoms worse. And here's another interesting angle. Some researchers think hppd might be related to how our brains naturally predict and process reality.
You mean like our normal perception might not be as stable as we think?
Exactly. There's this theory called the Bayesian brain model that suggests psychedelics might disrupt our brain's predictive processes, and in some people, those predictions don't fully reset afterward.
That's a pretty mind-bending idea. That our perception of reality is more flexible than we realize.
And it raises some fascinating questions about consciousness itself. Like what happens when our basic assumptions about how we see the world get challenged? Some people with hppd report feeling like they're stuck between two different ways of perceiving reality.
How does this fit into the broader conversation about psychedelic therapy?
That's really the key question right now. As these substances move into mainstream medicine, we need to understand both their potential benefits and risks. And hppd is this perfect example of how complex that balance can be.
It sounds like we're just scratching the surface of understanding how these substances affect our brains long term.
And that's what makes this whole field so fascinating. really at this intersection of neuroscience, psychology, and human experience, trying to understand how these powerful substances can both heal and potentially harm.
What should people take away from all this?
I think the main message is that while psychedelics show incredible promise for mental health treatment, we need to approach them with respect and caution. Understanding conditions like hppd isn't just about managing risks. It's about understanding the fundamental nature of human consciousness and perception.
That's quite a journey from visual distortions to the nature of consciousness itself.
Well, that's often how science works, right? We start by trying to understand one specific condition, and we end up questioning our basic assumptions about how we experience reality. The story of hppd is still being written. It's going to be fascinating to see what we learn in the years ahead.